Oh, we're back. Here we are. Hey, we did it. I don't know what happened. OBS just crashed. All right, where was I? Oh, so Dan Goldman, who was this prosecutor who was going after Trump during the impeachment, he then gets elected to, I believe, the Senate, right? He admits that he coached Michael Cohen. He coached him. So this guy from the DOJ ends up being one of the prosecutors, but trust us, the Democrats weren't involved. The Biden team wasn't involved. Dan Goldman is coaching the serial criminal who stole from Trump on what to say to get Trump. But trust them, it's not a gotcha or anything. And then they actually have a press conference outside the courthouse a few days ago talking about how much of a criminal Trump is, bringing celebrities and former disgraced January 6 officers, etc. But trust them, it's not political. Then we get to the jury instructions. First off, apparently this isn't unusual in New York, but it's nonsensical if you know anything about debate or the legal system. I can't imagine why this would be the case. The prosecution speaks last. Now, that's a huge disadvantage to the defense. So when I did policy debate, there was affirmative and negative side. The advantage to the affirmative was you spoke first and last. Speaking last is a huge advantage because that's what the jury or the judge is left in his mind the most. And you get to rebut what your opponent said, and you get to rebut it. If you speak second to last and you say XYZ, and then all of a sudden the other side comes up and says, I'll answer XYZ, and also here's ABC, you don't get a chance to answer ABC. Right? And so our legal system is set up that the defense is supposed to speak last because the legal system is supposed to prioritize the defense. You're innocent until proven guilty. The advantages are all supposed to be given to the defense. But apparently in New York, it's the opposite. The prosecution speaks last, and apparently that's not unusual, which it's unusual countrywide, but apparently not in the state of New York. It does seem to be unusual that cameras aren't allowed in there. I can't figure out why that wasn't the case. Well, I know why, because it's a show trial, and they didn't want evidence of that show trial to show how corrupt they were. So the prosecution speaks last, and nowhere in it did they really articulate what the underlying crime that was necessary was committed by Trump in order to justify charging him with this falsifying of business record. Nowhere in there were they able to articulate. We still don't know. We don't know now. The judge in his jury instructions did two things that were remarkably, well, there was a lot of things, but two things that were remarkable. One was he refused to give written jury instructions. Oh, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. The judge specifically excoriated the defense and said they were not allowed to talk about the interpretation of the law. That was the sole role of the judge. And yet, at the same time, the prosecution that got to speak last stood up and over talked about how Michael Cohen was complicit in a campaign violation, campaign expenditure violation, and that Trump was connected to that, which the judge would not allow the defense to talk about what the laws were, the interpretation. And nowhere was it argued anywhere that Trump had committed campaign finance violations. In fact, the FEC looked into it and declined to prosecute. That's the FEC under Joe Biden. And said, no, there's no campaign finance election violence. But the judge allowed them to say to the jury over and over, yes, there was. And then the judge in the jury instructions, who didn't give them a written copy of it, and you've probably heard this, he said, you don't have to agree on the crime. And I saw a bunch of left-wingers going, that's absurd, of course you do. No, what he was saying is, you have to have an underlying crime in order to charge for the falsifying of business records. However, you don't have to agree on what that underlying crime was. You could think it was tax evasion. You could think it's a campaign violation. You could think it's anything. Doesn't matter if you all agree. You could come to 12 different conclusions. Doesn't matter. All that matters is you think there was some crime. Whatever in your head you think it was, doesn't matter. Now, ways that Trump, that's insane. It's ridiculous, but that's literally what they did. Our entire legal system set up to sort of, and I believe there's a decision which Alito wrote the majority opinion on, right, that says that no, you have to agree on the underlying crime in order to charge things like these. It's insane. It's just kangaroo court, so there's no sense of trying to make sense to it. It's get Trump at any cost. That's what it is. You know, it's not rocket science here, okay? So, ways that Trump would be not guilty of this. First, it only has to be a threshold of reasonable doubt. One of the things that said, thank you, Tengo. I appreciate the sub. I really do. One of the things that was said by the judge, and I have to get the specific quotes, again, because there's not a transcript and because we didn't have cameras in the court, I was unable to see this, but it looks like he used this rain analogy where he's like, well, you could like infer intent. You can infer a crime occurred. For example, if you wake up and you look outside and everything's soaking wet, you can infer that it rained. So you don't have to have proof that the crime committed. But that seems nonsensical. It seems like the area of reasonable doubt would come in here. For example, you might say, well, that makes sense. If you wake up and everything's soaking wet outside, you could infer that it rained. Except that I look across the street and I see my neighbors with a hose spraying each other. Now, is there reasonable doubt as to whether or not it rained just because things are wet? Of course there is. So that's the first threshold. Was this proven beyond a reasonable doubt? Okay, so here's some questions that we have. What was the underlying crime? To those in my chat, if you're still here, I do apologize. I know that it crashed. Those in the chat that think Trump's guilty, tell me what the underlying crime was. Because that's necessary. So what was the underlying crime? Ask your friends this. He was charged with falsifying business records, but it's only a crime that they could go after if there was an underlying crime that it was covering up. What was that crime? Byron York, I saw just retweeted. He's like, can someone ask Bragg? Because no one said. Bragg never said. The prosecution never said. The jury hasn't spoken up about it yet. What was it? Did they all agree? Did several jurors think that there were different underlying crimes? We don't know. No, the sentencing hearing's July 11th, I think, right before. Maybe the appeal's July 15th. I don't know. But that's the sentencing hearing. I'd be shocked if the appeals process is exhausted before the election. So we don't know. We don't know what the underlying crime was. Was it campaign finance violations? The FEC said no. There was no evidence. There was just Bragg saying, yes, there were campaign finance violations. Where's their evidence of it? The people that I read that were listening to the trial said they never provided evidence. The judge never said, this is what a campaign finance violation is. Here's the law. The prosecution never, they just kept asserting it. Trump committed campaign violations. What were they? That's number one. Yeah, the 444, that's what people were calling it. Because there were three theories of underlying crimes that you could think that it was. Thank you, Legendary Rain. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. That's question one. Question two. Did Trump falsify records? Did he give the okay? What's the proof of that? What's the proof of that? Michael Cohen saying it? A serial liar? Yeah, if you understand the legal system, that 444 thing is insane. Thank you so much, Captains, for the raid. I appreciate it, Captain. So based on the word of Michael Cohen, there's no reasonable doubt there. This dude's been indicted for perjury, admits that he makes his money attacking Trump, admits that he stole $60,000 in this very transaction. Thanks, Captain. I appreciate it. That's it? That's your proof? No reasonable doubt there? But that's what the jury came to the conclusion of. Now, the end of this, and this was brought up by Roar89 that called in earlier, the irony of all of this is Hillary's campaign literally in 2016 did the exact same thing that they're accusing Trump of, except more blatantly, and she was given a small fine. So what we're told is, theoretically, the underlying crime is that they had a campaigned expenditure that was a violation. And then they falsified business records to cover it up. So Hillary's team, so with Trump's team, is it a campaign expenditure to have an NDA? I don't think so. Many legal scholars don't think so. In fact, most. And the legal theory that it is seems to immediately run into problems like, okay, so if I get a haircut, is that a campaign expenditure? They can't answer that. They have to make the argument that Trump would have never got an NDA with a woman who was extorting him unless he was running for president, which is... There we go. And understand this. This is the appeal of being on the establishment side. This is the appeal. Again, high voltage right here is the guy that's cheering for the Jim Crow South. High voltage is the guy that you could sit there in a community and see the police only arresting black people for speeding. And the speed limit's 45 miles an hour, and you see them, anyone who's going over 45 that's black, right around 45 or a little, arrest them, arrest them, arrest them, throw the book at them. Then you watch white people speed by at 80 miles an hour. Cop lets them go, cop lets them go, cop lets them go. Then you say, wow, a bigger problem than these speeding violations seems to be the unequal application of law. That seems to be a far more major problem here. That seems to be something that's very bad. And we can see that law enforcement's only going after the black people, and they're allowing the people committing the crime way worse because of their white to get off the hook. And high voltage would look you right in the eye and go, here we go, cry me a river. Was that black guy driving 46 miles an hour? Well, yeah, I guess he goes, then shut up, he's guilty. Shouldn't have broke the law, dude. That's who they are. That's the benefit of being, that's the cathartism of being unethical, of being an intentional imbecile or bad faith, one or the other. And so you just say, he was found guilty, therefore he was guilty. And it's the same rationale they used when there was like all of this mass censorship of conservative views online, etc. Well, they did it. They violated. Technically, the term of service says X, so they did it. And you're like, okay, that's fine if they're going to enforce it strictly, but here's a bunch of left-wingers doing the same thing or worse. Oh, what aboutism? That's what about it? That's the appeal. When you are on the side that is in institutional control, then you can have an unequal application of law. You can have an unfair system, and you'll always be able to say, but we can't look at that system. We can't. We can only look at each thing in an individual vacuum. That's it. So you can't say, okay, what we know for a fact, this is beyond dispute. Right, a righty accusing me of bad faith. Oh, the irony. Where's my bad faith? In fact, I debate lefties that are far more prominent than you, and one of the things they say about me is they might disagree with me, but they think that I'm sincere in good faith. But I'm sorry, who are you, Anonymous High Voltage 55? Apparently you have some sort of large following to exhibit that you know more than the people I debate routinely? Is that it? Getting messages here. So how big of a threat? So Trump's looking at 130 years. How serious of a crime is this? How serious is it? Does it like affect our democracy? This is my reaction for all of the cases. What reaction? That I have a worldview that says that I've been saying before the election of Donald Trump that we have a corrupt system that protects the people who are entrenched in power and goes after people that are potential outsiders. And then every instance that we've seen since Donald Trump started to run for president has proven that. And what I'm being told by people that are on the left is, but stop talking about what your worldview has been since 2012, 2013, and instead focus specifically on Donald Trump, which I've said routinely, if Trump committed a crime, that's fine. I think he should be charged. So for example, if we go to the handling of classified information, I didn't think Hillary Clinton should have been charged for that. I thought someone on our team should have been charged for intentionally destroying subpoenaed evidence, but I didn't think she should have been charged for the server, nor did I think that Barack Obama should have been charged, or Bill Clinton for things in the sock drawer, or Donald Trump, or Joe Biden. I think that unfortunately, even though by the book, those are probably technically crimes that were committed by all of those people, the truth is these are crimes that are committed by people in Washington all the time, that they mishandle classified information. And so we can't just selectively prosecute one or two of those people because we want to affect politics in that way. That was my personal belief on it. So I was consistent. I said, even though I compared to Hillary Clinton, I did not say Hillary should be locked up. I made the point in the classified document case that both in the case of Biden and Hillary, what was done was worse than what was done with Trump. For example, Trump is accused of obstructing justice because allegedly he told some guy to move boxes, which eventually the FBI got, but it's still obstruction because they attempted to move the boxes. In the case of Hillary Clinton, what we know is that they literally destroyed subpoenaed evidence that was never required. In the case of Joe Biden, we know that his ghostwriter literally destroyed evidence that he knew was going to be taken up in the investigation for the purposes of concealing it in the form of his tapes that he had in his interview with Joe Biden. That is literal obstruction of justice where they did not get the evidence, unlike in the case of Trump where allegedly he said something to some guy to move boxes and then they eventually got those boxes. In the Trump case, they eventually got the evidence back. In both the Biden and Hillary case, they did not get those evidence back. And yet none of them or charged with obstruction of justice, let alone the idea of mishandling classified information. Wang Chung asks a totally irrelevant question. He says, let's ignore every case he has. What is the least worst crime Trump could commit where young or your ilk wouldn't call this a banana republic? It has nothing to do with the crime Trump committed. We would call it a banana republic. If the prosecution of the entrenched establishment chooses to go after him for things that they themselves are doing more blatantly, then it's a banana republic. For example, let's say that Trump starts snorting huge rails of cocaine in public. I have no problem with him being arrested and charged with that. What I would have a problem if the guy who's cutting the lines right next to him is Joe Biden, or you could say Biden's president, so he can't be charged. So we'll say, instead of Joe Biden, we'll say it's Gavin Newsom. And Gavin Newsom's sitting right there with Trump, cutting those lines out, doing them in public. And they arrest Trump and not Newsom. If Newsom wasn't doing it, if it wasn't a crime that someone in the established party was doing with Trump, I'd say, sure, he committed a crime. This seems unique. It's blatant. Yes, lock him up. He deserves to be charged with that. However, I would say it's a banana republic if they said, well, we're not going to charge Newsom. Let me turn the question to you, Wang Chung. By the way, great song, great band. I like the band Wang Chung. Let me turn the question to you. How blatant does this double standard and how many double standards have to exist before you say this is a banana republic? Well, Hunter Biden's not an active politician. That's why. Please don't drag Rakita in this. Well, Rakita's having personal problems. None of my business. I wish him well. Again, a bigger threat. What's this crime that's so serious that Trump's looking at 130 years? That a porn star tried to extort him and he paid her money and then didn't write down on his campaign form, I paid her money. That's it. A process crime had little to do with the affecting the direction of our country at all. But he's looking at 130 years. What's a bigger threat to our country? That crime, which for the first time, it's unique in many ways. First time going after a former president. First time going after the active running candidate for president. First time I know of that they've used this legal theory where they took misdemeanors that the statute of limitations ran out, changed them to felonies and said, okay, even though the statute of limitations is out, we can still run with them. And pretty much the first time I know that a prominent politician has been gone after for campaign finance violations with criminal charges and not just fines. Right, and Wang Chung makes, and this is another one of the, how many times do I say this? I'm going to have to make a chart of this so we can see the NPC talking points that we see from Wang Chung, which the argument now becomes, and this is the Conor argument and a dozen other people that I've debated, which the argument is this, I think they're all corrupt, so we should just lock them up, and so we got to start somewhere, so we might as well start with Donald Trump. Right, except when they don't lock up Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Hunter Biden, etc., you won't see Wang Chung complaining. He'll say, oh, well, I guess they didn't lock them up. Oh, well. Isn't that convenient? Always just start. The very people that are committing the same crimes that they're going after Donald Trump for, he says, yeah, I agree they should be locked up as well. So he has no problem with these people who committed these crimes going after their opposition in Donald Trump. So once they lock Donald Trump up, he'll say, that's great. That's a good starting point. Now will these people lock themselves up? And when they don't, he'll go, ah, shucks. And I'll tell you why. It's because Wang Chung is a bad faith piece of shit. That's why. Because he's not being honest. More than he cares, he might be honest that he doesn't really care for these other people and doesn't care if they're locked up, but he thinks Orange Man bad. And so he will lie to himself either purposely or subconsciously to where he'll justify how he can't beat me in this debate, not just because I'm a good debater, which I am, but because I also have the facts. And so he can't articulate why these aren't double standards. And so instead he'll just default to something that seems like a reasonable defense where he'll say, well, I think they should all be locked up, and so I'm okay if they start by locking up Donald Trump. But we know that that's bullshit because he'll be perfectly fine when they don't lock up those other people because he knows damn well they're not going to lock up Joe Biden for mishandling classified documents. He knows they're not going to go back and lock up Hillary Clinton for falsifying campaign records. He knows that perfectly well. So he's just pretending like, yes, I guess this is a start, and from here on out, they'll proceed to lock themselves up when they commit these crimes. It's full of shit. Is it intellectual dishonesty? If Joe Biden got locked up on camera tomorrow, I wouldn't be on throwing a hissy fit. First, I'm not throwing a hissy fit. What I'm doing, it's something that someone would say that's getting blown the fuck out of the water like you are. It's not a hissy fit when I come on here and talk about my being disgruntled and disappointed with our two-tier justice system and our country becoming more and more corrupt. I'm not on here crying or anything like that. Now, I am high-pitched and I talk fast, but this is how I talk all the time. You should hear me talk about the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's even more infuriating. However, you're going to say that it's a hissy fit because you're getting blown out of the fucking water and you can't defend your stance, and you're literally just giving NPC talking points that I've done dozens of times. While it is true that I'm capable of blowing someone out of the water like you on these facts because it's something that I've looked into, the reason I sound so polished doing so is because I've had this exact same fucking conversation with a dozen people exactly like you. You come on and you say, whataboutism? I argue that it's not whataboutism. I argue how a bigger threat to our country is a two-tier justice system, particularly people that committed crimes covering up those crimes, but going after people that did lesser versions of that for the exact same crimes going after them. We've had this conversation over and over. You're unable to articulate why that's not a double standard, so you default to what most people do, or at least 50% of the people do, when you say that's fine, lock them both up, when you never spoke up about those other people being locked up. And so now that I correctly point out that you're just another NPC saying the same bad faith or dishonest talking points, now you resort to saying, but you're throwing a hissy fit, and if Biden got locked up, I wouldn't throw a hissy fit. And that's probably true, because you don't give a shit about Biden. I actually believe that. Your worldview isn't I support Biden. You're not a supporter, you're a hater. You hate Donald Trump. And so therefore, that's what your entire worldview is. And I have no problem believing that you and many other left-wing people and Democratic people would absolutely, if it meant Trump going to prison, say, sure, fuck it, throw Hillary in jail, throw Joe Biden. Doesn't matter. They're establishment candidates. There's literally thousands of them. You'll replace them with the next cog in the machine. Joe Biden has dementia, doesn't know what he's doing. You could literally replace him with anyone else, and the people running the show can tell that person what to do. So you don't care. I'm absolutely quite sure of that. All you care about is taking down Donald Trump. That's it. So you don't have a problem that the system will be done in a two-tiered way. You don't care. You don't actually really care about our country because you can't win the argument because, one, you can't beat me in a debate, but second, because it's eminently true that it is a bigger threat to our system that we have this two-tier system where we have all of these institutions working together to take down a candidate that's considered oppositional for the first time in history, to go after a president and the frontrunner for president, to look at be putting him in jail for 130 years for a crime, for a trial that was basically just a show trial. You can't defend any of that, right? And how that two-tier system is actually far more damaging to our country than anything Donald Trump was accused of. And so you just default to these cliches that I've heard dozens upon dozens of times. Old school. Thank you so much for the super chat, $9.99. Rob, I'm sick to my stomach. Not for Trump, I never really liked him. For a country, the rule of law and the Constitution died today. Biden, if he wins, will now never be legitimate. Yeah, I mean, this is true, and I talked about this at the beginning of the show. It's weird, it's cathartic to me because if I'm honest, not necessarily to my audience, but to a lot of people in the state-level Republican Party that I've talked to, it's a big I told you so. I've been talking about this since I've been involved in politics, how corruption was the biggest issue and how it was going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And no one wanted to believe me. And they get, and notice, by the way, the left or people like Wang Chung, I don't know if he's a lefty or if he's a Trump-hating writer. It doesn't matter. He's a Trump-hater. That's what it is. Notice how the attack that he levies at me at first is the whataboutism charge. That's what it is. Because that's central to what the establishment needs to cover up. That's the most important thing. That's the taboo subject that you can't talk about. Is this equal justice? Is this justice? And it's not. It's clearly not. And they can't defend it. And so that's the thing that they'll attack. They'll say, no, you just have to focus on Trump. You just have to focus on Trump. You just have to focus on Trump. So that's why I've spent, I'm quite clear. I'm not defending Donald Trump. I have no interest in that. If I was defending Donald Trump, I wouldn't have tried to do my damnedest to make sure to suggest people vote for other people in the primary. That's what I did. I admitted full on in a debate with Destiny, in fact, that the best thing that can happen for my political ideology is for Trump to go to prison. Preferably before the nomination so DeSantis could be the nominee. That would have been the best chance for my political ideology to win. So I'm not defending the person of Donald Trump. That's just, I guess I am, but that's happenstance. I'm attacking a corrupt system. Doesn't matter what Trump offers. It's irrelevant to the conversation I'm having. He didn't drain the swamp. I criticize him all the time. You should be here, Wang Chung. Let me go get some water and I'll be right back. Yeah, so getting back to the point of today then. So it's I told you so's, but this is an argument I have all the time. Like, I'll be like, oh, something broke today. A journalist broke this. And inevitably there'll be someone smug on my channel that'll go, we knew all this. We already knew all this. Right, we didn't have definitive proof, which now we have more proof. But the more important thing is, I and you who's saying that, it's a hypothetical you, we don't have a big as voice as some of these mainstream people. And so normies now get to see. And so what today was normies should see just how corrupt this is. Yeah, Adam, you could call in if you want. I don't know how much longer I'll go. I ain't staying up until 5 in the morning or some shit again. Mm-hmm. 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 Get on here. Someone's in the... Oh, okay. He's in the waiting room. What's up, Adam? Can you hear me,
Hello?
sir? Yeah. Now let me say this right out of the gate, Adam. I don't know if you agree or disagree with me, but one of the things I like about you already is your name in the chat is the same as your name in Discord. Because a lot of times it's confusing. Someone will say, "Can I call in?" Then they have a different name, so I don't know who the hell I'm talking to. So this, I'd say there's a 99.9% chance you're the same Adam Dole that was in the chat there. So.
Well, that's an entirely different person. No, I'm joking. No, same guy. I say same guy. So I broadly agree with most of your stances, but I'm right wing, more similar to Andrew Wilson than you are, and I guess my basic question, two. One is, what in your mind qualifies as corruption within a given political system?
So it's a difficult question. To me, if I had to define it just off the top of my head, I would say corruption is the knowingly illegal and immoral actions taken to entrench the people that are in power. That's how I would define it, just thinking off the top of my head. Now, if I could further expound upon that just a little, whatever definition we may come up with, this is clearly one of the pinnacles of it. Jailing your political opposition for non-crimes in a show trial while claiming that you're not doing it for political reasons, which is blatantly a lie as you're doing press conferences outside the courthouse, while protecting people in your own party that have done the exact same thing, even worse, is whatever your definition of corruption is, that should definitely meet it.
Well, so I guess I come from a much. I'm trying to get my thoughts in order here.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
My position is basically that when you're looking at a given political system, there's a level of the things that are actually allowed in the system sort of determines like the borders of what is or isn't, legal. Mm-hmm. I guess. Like I would say it is effectively not illegal for instance, Nancy Pelosi to commit whatever the heck kind of weird stock trading scam she does.
Well, so let me clarify.
Assuming that happens.
We'll assume that it happens, right? Okay, right. So what you're saying is it's not illegal if, in all practicality, it'll never be prosecuted. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Much.
I suppose you could make that argument, and so then you could extrapolate from that. It's not corruption if nothing will ever be done about it. Is that sort of the extrapolation?
Yeah. My basic position is that a system is basically what the outcomes are, assuming that people in the system know what the outcomes are going to be. And obviously that knowledge is very important, but I question how much, say, jailing a political rival could be considered corrupt if it is allowed within the bounds of the system.
It's an interesting point right now. I think it's a little semantic at face value, but I think it gets to the heart of something that's like, even under your interpretation here, I think that there's an important point that I can make as to why I would still feel it's corruption. So if we accept that, if we say, well, listen, we live in a practical world, right? And so if it's illegal for Congress people on paper to inside trade, but literally everyone does it and we all know it and they're never going to be jailed, why even bother call it corruption anymore? I would say then that the subject of who is calling it corruption matters then. And so what I would say is the reason I would still call that corrupt is because those are actions, even if they wouldn't be prosecuted, that are antithetical to me. They don't give a fuck about me. So the actions, if I say, fine, is it really corruption if no one will ever be dealt? I would say yes, because even though it won't be dealt with, they are taking illegal and immoral actions to denigrate me, to harm me and people like me and my community. And so I still feel that it's corrupt.
Okay, so at that point, it sounds as if your standard for corruption is something that harms you.
No, something that is illegal or immoral in my belief that harms me.
Okay.
For example, this would theoretically harm me. I have outstanding student loans. If the Supreme Court comes out and says, no, Biden, you can't forgive student loans, that theoretically financially harms me. That's not corruption.
Well, if the Supreme Court decides something's unconstitutional, that definitionally can't be illegal.
What do you mean?
The Supreme Court is the place where we find out whether or not something's constitutional or not. They have the power to make that decision.
Yeah.
So if the Supreme Court says this is constitutional, then it is constitutional. If they said it's not, it's not.
That's true.
So,
I could disagree with their interpretation and still say I feel that it's illegal, but by the people that have the power to enforce the laws, it no longer matters what I think. The end all be all would be the Supreme Court. I agree with that, right? But let me ask you this: what is why does this matter to you? Like how we define the term corruption? Why does it matter in the context of like what happened today?
Well, so that's actually like my next point. Mm-hmm. I don't see any issue at all with people on the right using similar tactics against leftists.
Nah. You know who you sound like? Richie. Do you know Richie? Yes. He's on Crucible's channel a lot. I like Richie a lot.
Yeah, I've spoken to Richie a number of times. But I do disagree with Richie on a number of points, and I should qualify that statement. I'm completely against political violence. Mm-hmm.
Good.
There is no case in which I think it is acceptable. One, because I think it's morally wrong, and two, because I think it doesn't work. But that's a different topic.
Are you Christian?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you think that you are justified to sin in order to win?
No.
Okay. Then you're basically adapting the same position as me.
How so?
Because what you're going to say is like we need to adopt some of the tactics of the left, so we need to lock their people up. However, it would be a sin to lie or to bear false witness, correct?
So because of the arbitrariness of the law here, it's not a lie to say that they're breaking a law.
That's completely different. That's fair game. I totally agree with you.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, for example, I think there's more than enough evidence to arrest Joe Biden, or at least heavily investigate him, subpoena him, etc., subpoena more of his bank records, etc., for his involvement with his son's scheme and for the fact that he did a quid pro quo to force the firing of a prosecutor that was looking into Hunter Biden. There's more than enough evidence to charge Hunter Biden. There's more than enough evidence to charge Hillary Clinton. More than enough to charge Bill Clinton. More than enough to charge a litany of Democrats. It would be very easy to start looking into them. My guess is 80 to 90% of politicians in the Republican and Democratic side have committed at least small crimes like campaign finance violations, etc. I think that it's the overwhelming majority of them, insider trading, etc. Start investigating them. I don't have a problem with it. What I can't say is if you look into them and that you don't see evidence of those crimes, saying, fuck it, we'll make it up. That I cannot abide. They had to have actually committed the crimes. We just happen to be, me and you happen to be in the fortunate position, the people that we despise are all crooked shitheads. So they probably did commit these crimes. Show me the person, I'll find you the crime. The laws are written so archaically, and we've agreed to abide by these set of laws, and they've been extrapolated and applied to Trump and Trump-supporting people so vigorously and stretched so mightily, I have no problem doing the same thing to the left. My only point was what I was saying was I can't lie. I'm not saying just make shit up. That I cannot abide. But I would say 90 to 95% of them have committed crimes that could be prosecutable. So go for it. So for all practical purposes, I think we're on the same page, where I'm definitely saying fight back. I'm definitely, I just don't, what I don't want to see is just people coming out, because I think it's immoral, as we agreed, we wouldn't bear false witness, but it's also not strategic. So if a prosecutor in a red state comes out and just makes shit up about Joe Biden, and then it gets proven that he just made it up, that's going to look really bad going forward the next time you accuse someone. So it has to be something that actually happened. But I have no problem playing the same legal tricks and what have that's been used. No problem. That's perfectly fine. It's within the bounds of the parameters that they've set up. It is not a sin for me to hold people to the standard that they held other people to. That's not a sin. That's not against my morality. That's absolutely fine. Now, me personally, there's a separate question of the actions I'm willing to personally take. Am I willing to dock someone or call their employer to get them fired? No, I'm not going to do that shit. Do I feel bad when people that did that to people on the right get that done to them? No, I don't feel bad, but I personally will not engage in that sort of behavior.
Okay, so I guess I must have misunderstood what you were saying earlier. Earlier in the stream when you were talking about an inevitable right-wing reaction, and I know, saying X will happen doesn't mean an endorsement of X.
Well, let me clarify if I can. So like in a conversation with Richie, I had this conversation with Richie. Richie makes the point, do you think that they're indoctrinating our children in schools? I say, absolutely. And he's like, so what's your stance? What should schools be? I say, well, I'm not so sure we should have public schools. I don't think we should. But to the extent that we do, I think that they should be teaching math and writing and English and, that sort of shit. They shouldn't be indoctrinating any of these philosophies, right? And Richie's point is, if they're going to indoctrinate with their bullshit, Satanist or secular worldviews, we should do the same in return and indoctrinate with our views. And I was like, I can't go that far. I still am principled in saying, right? So like Richie's just like, whatever the fuck they do to us, we should do to them. Now, most of that's going to be, and again, he's not talking about violence. Let me separate that. But most of that's not going to be.
I'm aware of Richie's stances.
Yeah, but he would say, like Richie would probably say, "Fuck yes." If someone doxes someone, you dox them back. Yes, if they call your employer to get you fired, you call them back. And even if they didn't call, if they stood idly by while leftists did that, you do that in return to them. And yes, we want people that specifically, we absolutely want people in positions of power that say, I'm a Christian nationalist, we're going to rewrite the laws to say, that's not who I am as a person. And then in further context, what I was saying is a conversation I had with a guy named Aircraft Sparky last night, right? Which is, I have to tell the truth myself to the best of my ability, right? And so, for example, there are stories that I was criticizing, like Julie Kelly reporting that was stretched into saying that the raid in Mar-a-Lago was an assassination attempt because there was a provision for use of deadly force. But upon looking at it, that provision is standard operating procedure. It's just like a boilerplate stamp they put on everything. You could say, well, they should have had more than a boilerplate if they're going after an unprecedented person like the former president. Okay, that's fine. That's an argument. But I think it's a stretch to call it an assassination attempt. And what I was telling Sparky is, I have no problem fighting fire with fire, but it has to be within the parameters that I feel that I'm still upholding my morals. I can't just say, you know what, even though I don't think this was an assassination attempt, I bet it'll get me a few clicks and a few views on X if I say it was, and it'll hurt Biden, and that's good. I can't do that. And I don't need to, because by not being true to myself and misleading, I hurt the only thing that I have going for me, which is my authenticity. So I hurt that going forward, because there'll be people that'll say, well, Rob's willing to lie for a short-term benefit, and I don't want to have that reputation. But more importantly, I think that it distracts from actual strategic value things that we could be talking about that are more important, such as today's trial. Like, this is huge. like the raid itself was corrupt. I don't need to focus on one sentence that was standard operating procedure. So that's what I'm talking about when I say, like, there are people that are coming that won't feel the same way. There are people that are coming that'll be like, fuck that. We'll imprison anyone that disagrees with us for political reasons. Fuck them. That's going to come. That's going to come on the right. It's here on the left, and inevitably, equal and opposite reaction. There's going to be people that come up on the right. And one of the messages I try to give to centrists and leftists is, you have to stop this. You have to nip this in the bud before it gets worse, because if you don't, it's going to become a tit for tat like you can't believe. And I've said this many times. If Andrew Wilson or Richie or any of the Christian nationalists come into power, the irony is my life will be substantially better. They're going to like me. They might say, Rob's not the exact type of Christian we like, but he's a stand-up dude. He's a Christian. He appreciates our values. He attacked these crazy people that were indoctrinating children. He basically agrees with us with 90% of shit. He's a cool dude, even if he's going to argue with us on things on the fringe. That's how it would be. As opposed to today, where I could lose my fucking job if I don't take the right DEI training. So which of those worlds would I prefer? Clearly the Christian nationalists. However, the world I would really prefer is my ideology, which isn't going to win. I'm going to lose. There won't be a more moderated populist victory. There won't be. Because we've been trying and we keep failing over and over. And so now the momentum's going to go to more hardline right-wing people. And all I could say is I'll be happier in that society. I'll push back against those people when I think it's appropriate. But I far prefer those people to the status quo. Far and away. If we end up banning gay marriage, which I think would be a terrible idea, but if we end up doing that, and I have to evaluate that against fucking literally being locked up for memes, or my kid being indoctrinated into trans issues as a kid, I know which one I'm willing to accept. That doesn't mean I still wouldn't argue for gay marriage. I would, but I'm just saying I'm going to be far happier. That's why I'm not really interested in picking huge fights with the right wing. I love debating Andrew. I love debating people in the Crucible, and I'll keep doing it because it's fun. But strategically, both Andrew and I understand the enemy we're up against is so grotesque and so powerful that I'm willing to take allies wherever. I'll take allies on the left that want to fight against this corruption. No problem. Jimmy Dore, Aaron Mattei, Matt Taibbi, sign them up. If that's their issue going after this corruption, no problem. Andrew would tell you he'll take allies anywhere that are pushing back against this radical trans agenda. He don't give a shit. Maybe you disagree with him on gun rights. Doesn't matter. You're an ally on the issue that matters. And so that's how I feel with it.
Well, I guess I sort of have to challenge at least two things.
Sure.
You seem to... So I would question whether or not it's possible to have a justice system that isn't at least a two-tier justice system. I'm not sure that that's possible historically.
Well, it's not.
I don't. Okay.
Do you want? I could leave you do the whole thing if you want, or I could do point. I'll just be very brief. It's not. Of course not. There will never be. We will never live in a utopia unless you're Christian and you go to heaven. Other than that, there is no utopia.
Okay.
So of course there'll never be. But the problem is the egregious nature of this justice, of how two-tiered this is, and that it's done so for political beliefs. That's what's uniquely bad. That's what makes it uniquely Soviet era. So for example, there will always be a two-tier justice system that those with more wealth will be able to provide for a better defense. Yes, that's inevitable. There's nothing we could do except try to tweak little things to limit that as much as possible. That is vastly different than a society when the people in positions of power can lock up people just because they're opponents. That's a vastly different two-tier system that I'm talking about.
Well, I suppose I'm not, I guess the term I thought of today, which I'm now going to be using, I think, is political egalitarian. I don't think that different political views should be treated equally in society, and I know you don't believe this either. Like, you could probably think of at least 5 political views that you think should be shunned and basically effectively banned from society as a whole. I could name some, but you're on Twitch.
I don't know. Well, okay. Let's take a common political view that I could say that I think is grotesque. Communism, right? I don't like communism, right? Do I think communists should be banned? No.
Well, no. Effectively, they are right now.
How so?
And they're banned in a way that you would like.
They have a lot of power, actually.
But it's practically impossible for an avowed Stalinist to hold public office in the U.S.
Yeah, but that's not through legal mechanisms. I would be against the United States government saying it's illegal to be a communist. I'm perfectly fine with people saying communism's shitty, so effectively if you announce yourself as a communist, you're going to lose. Perfectly fine for that. I'll go even further. I don't think we should ban people claiming that they're running as a Nazi party. Fine by me. You could say that. You're not going to win shit. But it should not be illegal.
I disagree. I disagree with a number of presuppositions you're making. The main one is that politics basically stops in the legal system. Obviously, there's still a bunch of political nonsense that goes on in, say, Twitter. Like, just being able to promote yourself on Twitter that has a massive political impact.
Absolutely, agreed. Yeah.
So you can't just point to the legal system and say, oh, the formal legal system, that isn't the only legal system.
Well, that's true,
You
but
also
what control do I have over the Twitch legal system, right? So when we're talking about system of government,
well, I'm asking about prescriptions. I'm not asking about whether or not you yourself can implement these things.
so you're
Because
saying
obviously
that,
you can't and I can't.
okay, then let's go by step by step. Should the United States federal government make it illegal to be a communist?
No.
Okay, why not? If it's a
Not
repugnant,
formally.
and let's insert. We don't have to say their name, but let's insert communist with whatever you think the most repugnant political persuasion should be. Do you think that they should ban? Yeah. Now, I just want to be clear, right? We're talking about a political party, not by things that we consider actual crimes, like harming children. That's probably what you're talking
Yes.
about.
Yeah.
That's not a political party. Right.
Well, so you can have political groups who support it, like some
that's
post-leftists.
that's a different question, right? Right. So should it be illegal to say that you want to lower the age of consent?
So it isn't about legality per se. Legality is important, but it isn't the end all be all. There's a distinction between, like, this is classic Machiavellianism where you have foxes and lions, where just making it illegal and then like busting down somebody's house and like kidnapping them or arresting them, whatever. That's lions. We don't like lions. Nobody in the modern day likes lions. It's all fox shit now. To steal from, I think this is something that a point that Sam Francis makes in his book Leviathan and Its Enemies. So instead, what you have is a bunch of nudge tactics to get people slowly further and further away from certain ideas indirectly.
Right.
And I think that system is just as, I think it's more important than the actual formal legalization and illegalization.
Okay, but we have to start, like, you would say that it's more authoritarian. We start with the most authoritarian position, which is literally the government making it illegal. So, I disagree with you that if you're claiming that, for example, we should make it illegal to question age of consent laws, I disagree, right? Because if that's the case, you could quickly see how it would get out of hand. You could say, okay, we could now make it illegal to question laws. I think that that's a very bad road to go down. So I think you should be legally allowed to question it. I don't have a problem then if we go to the opposite end of, without any government force whatsoever, just us as individuals culturally shaming those people, ostracizing those people, telling those people we don't want them around us at any. That's perfectly fine. I don't have a problem with that. Then there's this middle.
Well, hold on. Just one thing. You're talking cultural. I don't believe that these sort of cultural forces actually exist.
Sure, they do.
Well, no, because the only sense in which a cultural force can exist is if people adopt a particular belief, and people don't generally pick the beliefs that they adopt. They're given to them by others.
I could point to a clear example how you're wrong. What about the Crucible? Okay. What about the Crucible community?
So the Crucible community is literally people who like Andrew's views, and then they take Andrew's views and apply them in their own lives in some way.
No problem. So that's a community that has some sort of shared beliefs. Now, let's say that someone in that community, let's say me, for example, I'm sort of... But
the views come to them from top down.
Doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. It still wouldn't mean that it's not cultural. So I'm sort of accepted in that community somewhat. Let's say I go into that community tomorrow, and I'm talking to Andrew Wilson. I'm like, I think they should lower age of consent to 10 years old. Now, that community, without me being arrested or without that being an illegal stance, would say, fuck you.
Yeah, you're going to be shunned.
Shit, you're out of here. You're shunned. That is an example of what I'm talking about. I have no problem with people that congregate together. And you could say, I don't term that culture. That's fine. It doesn't matter semantically what we call it. I have no problem with people of their own free will collectively coming together and saying, we're going to ostracize people that have beliefs that we find repugnant. Totally fine with that. The question then becomes, like, is there a middle ground? Is there things that, like, sort of are policy prescriptions that aren't just individuals collectively, voluntarily making some sort of decision? And you could argue perhaps there are. Perhaps we could talk about things of large corporations and the sort of things that they allow to be discussed on public platforms. So that becomes then sort of a middle ground conversation. So if we say, no, the federal government shouldn't make it illegal, but yes, we should ostracize these people, then the middle ground question becomes, should we enforce social media platforms to say that these sort of conversations shouldn't be allowed to happen? I don't know. I'm ambivalent. I'd have to think about it in specific nature. Now, I would not be for the federal government forcing it. If it was my personal platform, I would say, yeah, I'm not going to leave people that are making excuses for harming children on the platform. That's some place that I'll draw the line. That's something I think that people get wrong about Elon Musk. When they talk about Elon Musk is a free speech absolutist, that's not true. Almost no one is. There's a line almost anywhere that people would say, I don't want this shit on my platform, right? When they say free speech absolutist, what in theory they're referencing is that he'll allow people of differing political persuasions on. He's not going to censor you for your political beliefs. But if you have beliefs that are advocating for crimes, like, for example, if you go on X and you're like, I think we should all commit this crime, he's going to be like, no, you can't do that. You can't, like, and people would say, but that's free speech. You could say that. No, I mean, technically you're right. It is free speech, but he's not an absolutist. You know, it's not a technically correct moniker that he's a free speech absolutist. He's saying, I don't want to censor people because they have political beliefs that differ from me. So I don't know. Would you have the government force Twitch to not be allowed to people to question the age of consent?
It's completely unnecessary to have to have the government force them to do it. I'm sure you're aware of the history of I believe it was either drunk driving laws or age to allow driver's license laws in the U.S. in relation to the highway system.
Yes.
Okay. So the government can do things such as withhold funds in order to incentivize certain actions by nominally independent groups. Yeah, so I would say it's basically the exact same for these major social media companies. The government doesn't have to come in and say, you ban X speech or we'll shut you down. The government can say, we're not going to give you as preferential treatment unless you do X. And then it's not explicit. They can bury it in some legal nonsense. It's not going to go public, but the government's still going to do it. Or alternatively, they can just do what was revealed in the Twitter files, which is a much more explicit and still seems to have worked pretty well.
Yeah, well, I'm against what they did in the Twitter files, obviously, even if it was for things that I don't like per se. And then to your first point, I agree with you. I do, right? And in all practical purposes, that is the way things work, and I agree with you. However, I would say the government should not be giving money or preferential treatment to any of these organizations. Now, I'm well aware that that's not the way it works, that they do, and we're operating within this system, right? So I get it, and so I do agree with you. But if I was in charge, I'd say, fuck that, no more money for any of them. That's what I would say.
Just to be clear, in an ideal world, my sort of system of government and your system of government are probably completely identical.
Yeah.
But
right.
But I think, okay, this is how the government works. I have my goals. I want them done. And if the government works like this, I'm going to exploit everything I can without violating my morals. And that means I'm perfectly fine with, I think that if you, like, say, for instance, support abortion, you should be a social pariah to a similar extent as somebody who supports, like, 1930s Germany. I think that they're pretty much similar views. And I think that you should basically be banned off of Twitter if you support that, because that's an evil belief. It's completely evil.
I don't know that. I don't know that you could ban. I wouldn't be for Twitter banning that, though. I have no problem with treating.
Well, hold on. Would you support Twitter banning people who support Germany circa 1930?
No.
Okay. Well, at least you're consistent on that.
I just went. Hey, I got to tell you, I would be happy to talk to you again, but I only have like 20 more minutes, and I wanted to talk a little more about the Trump. Honest to goodness, I'm not kicking you off because I'm not enjoying the conversation. I am. But just given what's going on today, and I only have 20 minutes, I figured I'd wrap up talking about that, if that's okay with you.
I'm perfectly fine with me. Have a nice day, Rob.
Yeah,
Thank you for
call
having me
back
on.
in. I really appreciate it. We'll talk more. See ya. It was a good call. No, those sorts of discussions. And see how much better that went than the conversation with the ANCAP? If you're bored and you want to see a 9-hour cluster F, check out last night's live stream. Holy cow. My goodness. That guy, Aircraft Sparky was fine, but the guy that called in after him, oh boy, what a mess. Anyways, what are we talking about here in the chat? Crisco's pulling some good Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Stopped fishing. Now he's doing Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Good for you. Yeah, I mean, the fundamental difference that I have with a lot of the sort of crucibled Christian nationalist type crew is I have a libertarian bent to me, and that's going to put me directly at odds in some cases. Now, the truth is the ideal society we're envisioning that wouldn't require government pressure on certain things would probably be very similar. Like, we have the same values. We have the same interpretation of what it means to be a moral person and what it means to be a family man and what a family unit should look like. We share those beliefs, but how we get there and how much force we apply to get there. Yeah, well, I am libertarian leaning. I consider myself a populist first and foremost, and I'm not a complete libertarian. But I will agree, I always lose politically. I certainly do. Biden's bravest shoulder. Got to give it to Black Elk, man. Dude, I got to shout out Black Elk again. I really do. Please, please, please. If you ever see Black Elk on here, I know he doesn't talk a lot in the chat anymore, but this dude on his own his own gumption just contacted me and was like, I'll be happy to edit videos for you. And he does a tremendous job and puts in a lot of work, and I couldn't be happier with what he's doing. And I hope that he gets noticed by a bigger channel than me that needs an editor, and he ends up making a career out of it, because he really deserves it. But I cannot speak highly enough of Black Elk. I think it's been tremendous. So, and wherever you're watching, you'll see links below in the description to Black Elk's X channel. It's just Black Elk House, all one word. Please check out his X channel. Give him a follow if you can. I think he's a really great guy, and I can't say enough. Him, Aftershock, who's always been great, has helped me out tremendously. Syrian Bots, who's always tweeting out people, a lot of my stuff. And there's a lot of other people too. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Ogre or Punish there, who used to edit for the same sort of no money, just trying to make me better. Used to edit my TikTok videos, who did a tremendous job on it. Do I think so? Wang Chung now makes the argument that my friend Tom Kennedy made previously, which I've already dispensed with this argument from someone who's far more trustworthy and probably intelligent than Wang Chung. He says, don't I think this all started during the Trump rallies in 2016 with the whole lock her up thing? First off, I have made the argument definitively before that it hardly seems that people that are Trump supporters could get upset that there would be people on the left saying lock him up because Trump said lock her up. So for those people to sort of get the vapors seems nonsensical. Saying lock someone up because you see evidence of what you think is a crime and saying you think they should be prosecuted and you're running for a political office isn't maybe the most prudent thing to say, but it's not that big of a deal. It's something that's been said since that many, many times, and it was probably said before that people should be in jail. Certainly, for example, I can imagine politicians like Ron Paul that probably said that he thought people like Bush should be locked up for war crimes, or people like Dick Cheney. Not really a huge deal. Which is a huge deal is the following two things. One, prosecutors running on the promise of locking up an opponent, because that's different, because unlike running for a political position as a prosecutor, you actually will have the ability to go through with that promise. And second, the thing that's more serious is actually locking someone up in Banana Republic style trials. So I'm supposed to believe that it's Trump's fault that he said lock her up, that now we have these Banana Republic trials that are absolute bullshit, that are letting people on the left off the hook or in the establishment off the hook, but going after Trump for crimes that they committed even more seriously. But it's all okay and it's Trump's fault because he said lock him up. Yeah, that's Josiah's argument. It's nonsensical. Absolutely nonsense. And if that is the argument, if that's Josiah's argument or anyone else's argument, it's like, okay, fine. If I can't convince you that and you say, nope, everything's fair game because Trump said the words lock her up, so now everything's fair game, then I don't want to hear you fucking cry when someone gets in there and decides to lock up your people. I don't want to hear you cry and say this isn't fair. I'll say, you said everything's fair game because Trump said lock her up. So now everything's on the table. So whatever, you can blame Trump if you want, but you don't get to complain when your people get locked up. Right, and I already explained this. Actually, when Trump was president, quite the opposite. He didn't weaponize his Justice Department to go after his opponents. His Justice Department went after him. Is it bad when sitting political presidents say political opponents should be indicted because there's video of Trump doing that, but no video of Biden doing it? No, it's not necessarily bad. I have no problem with that as long as they're not using their authority to force the locking up of their opponent. So what we're trying to say here is Wang Chung saying the DOJ under Joe Biden that's literally locking up January 6 people that were not violent, treating like terrorist groups like Mon for Liberty, going to school board meetings to harass moms at school board meetings that didn't like things like mass or indoctrination of their children, going after Trump for crimes that we know that Joe Biden and Hillary committed. All of that, right? Biden's DOJ doing that, no problem, because we don't personally have Joe Biden on tape saying, lock up Trump. Now, we do have much reporting that says behind the scenes he's always expressing frustration that the Trump trials are taking too long and that he should be out of count. And we do have his campaign doing press conferences outside. And we do have the third guy at the head of the DOJ leaving his job to join the prosecution's office under Bragg. We have all of that. And we do have evidence that actually we saw all of these meetings like Letitia James and others that were going to the White House when we were told they weren't cooperating. What's up, Lathwater Kai? How's it going? We have all of that. But none of that matters because Biden didn't say on camera, lock him up. On the other hand, we have Trump on camera saying, lock them up, but he didn't do any of that. No investigations, no locking up. And so which one's worse? Which one's worse? You see? You see how these people look at things? Lathwater, I got to get in touch with you. Is there any way we could push that debate back a day? Because unfortunately, I thought we were doing this debate yesterday, and then Wick got in touch. I got to check the dates, but Wick got in touch with me then before last night and was like, can you do a debate next week? I thought he said next Wednesday, and I was like, sure. I didn't realize that our debate got pushed back to next Wednesday. So I'll get in touch with him and see exactly when the date is, but oh, they don't overlap? As long as they're not running at the same time, that's fine. Okay. That's fine. I don't have a problem doing two in one night. That's no problem. As long as my wife doesn't have a problem with it. I just assume she'll be fine. So, all right, I'm going to be wrapping up. I mean, what is there to say? What's the take from this? It is a Rubicon. It is, even though this corruption has been endemic in our system for years and years and years, and I've talked about it for years, this is the most blatant of the corruption. If I had to choose, Wang Chung, between Biden saying Trump should be locked up, DeSantis should be locked up, Vivek should be locked up, and no investigations or locking up of those three occurring, or him not saying that and investigations of all of them occurring, I would choose the former. What would you be saying, Wang Chung, if Trump wouldn't have said that, but weaponized his DOJ, paid for a dossier from Russians that he knew was bullshit, used as an excuse to spy on Joe Biden, have a 4-year investigation into him, raid people connected to him, violate attorney-client privilege, tip off Fox News to show up at the house of the lawyers of Joe Biden when they showed up and drug him out of their underwear, had his FBI change forms or change evidence to say the opposite of the truth to continue that spying that was going on, forced the firing of a prosecutor that was looking at a company that his son was on the board of directors of. What would you have said if all that happened? You would have said, oh, that's fine because he didn't say the words lock him up. You didn't say it. So that's perfectly fine. Again, I'm now guessing, I couldn't figure out at first if Wang Chung was a righty that hated Trump or a lefty, but I now think he's a lefty, and here's why I know. Because he's going with the old maxim, to a lefty, their violence is speech. And to a lefty, your speech is violence. Trump saying lock her up, big deal. Biden's team actually locking Trump up, no big deal. You see? Trump's speech is violence. Biden's violence is speech. Oh, thanks, Crisco. I'll pass, but it's very nice talking. Investigating is one thing. No, I don't think the DOJ did. I think quite the opposite. In fact, we see that the IRS was looking into Hunter Biden and wanted to look into Joe Biden, and they were told that they weren't allowed. They wanted to look into Hunter Morris, and the CIA told them they weren't allowed. What we saw from the DOJ and the FBI under Donald Trump, there was a political figure that they were investigating heavily. Do you know who that figure? Do you know who that political figure was? Who do you think the political figure was that the FBI under Trump investigated most heavily? If you had to take a guess, who do you think it was? Anyone in the audience want to take a stab at that? The FBI was investigating a prominent political figure quite frequently under Trump's administration. Who was it? That's right, it was Donald Trump. What a crooked dictator. Anyways. Just curious, the people that are saying, the Democrats that we see right now saying lock Trump up because they think he mishandled classified information. Are you also saying that all of them, that's inappropriate? That's literally like pretty much every Democrat. So just curious. And you'll say, well, that's because an investigation already started and they found evidence of wrongdoing and they think he's guilty. Right, that's the exact same truth of lock her up with Hillary. Right, they found evidence that she mishandled classified documents. It was public knowledge. That's why Trump was saying lock her up. Who committed treason? Trump? The last message I'll say is to all the lefties that are watching today that are celebrating. I have no problem with that. Listen, probably as a lefty, you don't have a lot to celebrate in life. You don't have like probably personal relationships and things like that. So that's fine. Take this win. January Stop the Steal rally was not treason. You're absolutely allowed to have a rally to say that you think there was corruption in the election. He did not tell them to go be violent. He did not foster an environment where they were trying to kill senators or anything like that. That's all bullshit. He told them to go be peaceful. Instead, what we see is that the sergeant at arms under Nancy Pelosi routinely accused the Capital City Police Chief, what was his name, Stephen Sund, over and over and over when he requested that the National Guard be deployed. The person that answered directly to Nancy Pelosi lied under oath and said as soon as it was requested of him, he allowed that to happen. That's not true. Stephen Sund said he made over 17 calls and he has the records to prove that. Sund said afterwards that he talked to Paul Irving, who was the sergeant of arms under Mitch McConnell, and Irving said when he talked to the sergeant at arms under Nancy Pelosi, he said that Nancy Pelosi would never allow the National Guard there for optics. And so they weren't going to have him there. So that's a direct line of communication of testimony that we have with someone under oath who was the point person in charge with defense of the Capitol at the time, saying Nancy Pelosi herself intentionally, while she said both before and during she claimed an insurrection was happening, refusing to allow the proper security to be there. So if anyone committed an insurrection, it's Nancy Pelosi, because for optics, they wanted people to get to the Capitol so they could say, see, this is an insurrection. There's no evidence that Trump coordinated, approved, or had any sort of doings whatsoever of people engaging in acts of violence there whatsoever. The fact that you call it treason, which you admit should be the death penalty, is absurd. You saying his fucking words, take down the mags, they are not here to kill me. What mags? Crimson wants to call me a fat C word. That's what he wants to call me here. So I'll tell you what, Crimson, I'll make a special offer for you. You can call in to debate me right now if you like. Show me the quote where he said that, Crimson. Show me. Oh, now you changed the quote. So just to be clear, someone that said that, it called me words, said that he said, quote, take down the mags. They're not here to kill me. That's what he said. It turns out that quote never happened. He lied. He said I was a liar, but he lied. Now, this is another person last night that's saying I'm a liar, right? I never said that. He didn't say, don't arrest them. They're not here to kill me. I didn't say that. I talked specifically that he didn't say or have anything to do with them engaging in acts of violence or trying to harm senators or anything like that. That's what I said. He said I was a liar because Trump said the direct quote of take down the mags, they're not trying to kill me. That's a lie. That quote was never said. So Crimson, who wants to call me, show me that quote. Hutchinson, we have no proof that what she testified. Wasn't Hutchinson the same one that said Trump tried to jump over? Hutchinson's the one, right, that testified that Trump in the Beast, the limo, tried to jump over it and manhandle the Secret Service driver to drive back. That Hutchinson? That one? That's what you're testifying to? He committed treason, execute him. Hey, Crimson, thanks for calling me a fat F and C word. Have a good one, man. All right. Boop, boop, boop. I'm fucking with Conor right now. Conor, so there's this conversation. I'm going to divulge a little. There's a conversation happening on this debate that I was supposed to happen next week where Admiral Gibbs is going back and forth with Conor. And Gibbs is like, anyone who's not upset about this trial of Trump isn't a real conservative. And Conor's like, yeah, conservatism's just not sucking Trump's D. And I said, hey, Conor, remember when you said you thought Trump was guilty of this case because you can't use campaign money to pay off a woman you slept with? And it turns out you had it completely backwards? Remember that? Remember when I debated Conor and he said, oh, well, Trump's clearly guilty. You can't use campaign money to pay off this hooker. And actually he's being charged because he didn't use campaign money. And not only did he have to use campaign money, he had to classify it as a campaign expenditure. Remember that? Now you would think Conor would be out there today and saying, this is a sham of investigation. I don't like Trump, but it's clear that I was misunderstood what this was about. And it's clear this is not an application of law. This isn't justice. You think that's what he'd be saying. But instead, he's probably out there celebrating. Oh boy, I hope I get to do this debate next week. I'm gonna pick a fight. let me see what Conor's saying right now on Twitter before I type what I'm about to type. Oh shit! Why can't I find? Does anyone have Conor's Twitter? Is it two N's? Shit, I better not type that. He doesn't say anything? Okay. I almost... I said, you remember when you had a complete at counter Conor? Okay. I was going to say, or did Progressive Victory pay you to forget that? That's the wrong Conor. I'm not looking for McGregor. Okay. I won't say it. He didn't say anything on Twitter. All right. We're going to head out here tonight. Is there anyone to raid? We'll do that real quick. Let's raid Lecture Fan. Lawyer. Maybe he has better stuff to say than me, though. Let's be honest. It's hard to beat me. But yeah, enjoy this raid of Lecture Fan. Hopefully I'll be streaming tomorrow. I can't make any promises. If so, it'll probably be around 8 p.m. But that's the plan. Thanks, Trump. Inshallah. I missed that. Sorry if I missed anything in the chat. I was going off on a tangent like I usually do. So enjoy this raid of Lecture Fan. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow night unless life intervenes. And as always, have a good one.
They did not.